So in this lecture, we are going to be discussing hidden fields and how we can use them for custom field validation in our form. The way our form is currently set up in our previous project, it's actually pretty open and not only to the users to maybe misuse the form or bad information for bad information, but also potentially to boards also this is open. That is automated scripting programs that come in and fill information into your form on your website. So there are many boards are available. Django has actually built-in validators you can conveniently use to validate your forms, not just for user misbehavior but also for boards. And everything we do here is going to be limited to the forms.py file. So instead of going through the concepts in slides, we are going to jump straight into the coding part. And so we'll use the basic form app form from the previous lecture we have coded. So you can either just download that form, the notes, or if you worked along with previous solution lecture. So we'll do three main tasks here. We'll add a check for empty fields, and we will add a check for a boat, and then we will show you how to use a clean method for entire form. Okay, let's hop over to the code editor and let's code for that. Okay, so I have the forms.py file that was under the basic app of your application, and remember we have three basic inputs: the name, email, and my local host. And this my local host right now I am actually not running the server. So let's run this server again, and I'm going to manage.py, python manage.py run server, or when I hit enter and I can see the servers started. Okay, so here you can see the server started. So let's refresh this page and then it says welcome to the home page from last time, and let's type in slash home page. So go to it, and here the I see the name, email, and text. So again, remember, if I type name, type email, and text and hit submit, actually get it printed out to the console. That will print it out to the console. Okay, name, email, and text. But now let's start off by looking at how we can use hidden fields. Now, a hidden field is something that remains in the HTML but is actually hidden from the user. Okay, but it is available in the background. And a lot of times we can actually use this to try to catch malicious bots on our website. And I'm going to collapse the directory here. So we get a little more space, and let's create a field called bot catcher, and we will call its bot catcher and forms.py equal to forms.care field. Okay, and we will pass in the requirements or required parameters to be false here. Okay, and the reason we want to specify that required is equal to false is because when we actually have this field, it's not going to show up on the page for the user. It's only in the HTML in the background. So we actually need to inspect the page to even see that catcher exists, and we will show that in just a minute. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is to define what widgets we are using. So the widget parameter is going to be form, and instead of a text area or a checkbox or something like that, we are going to be using a hidden input, and that's what is going to allow us to hide this from a typical human user. And you can also give a label here. Okay, we we would not need to do that, so let's actually just close that off. Those are the only two parameters we need. So if I save this and my page reloads, okay, here you can see, if I refresh this and let actually say cancel or submit one more time, and then refresh, hit continue, and I am inspecting the page, and in the elements actually don't need to check out to style, so it can collapse that I expand that. Okay, this body, it says fill out the form, and here I expand the form and I see not just my this token, but if I expand this, I also see this boat catcher input. Okay, so remember that's the CSRF. That's only also helping the security of your website CSRF token. You can see it actually has this basically a random code value that's randomly generated for the user side. And Django is going to check that match is on the back, and that's just an extra layer of security to make sure that the input you put in the form is not going to some other website or vice versa. Now the input that we just made was boot catcher, which is given the id automatically. Okay, id underscore boot catcher, it's given the name boot catcher and the type is hidden. And basically what's going happen here is if a bot visits your page, they will not look at the actual website. What they are going to try to do is look directly into the HTML, and then they are going to try to automatically fill in values, attributes, and then submit the form that way. Now, if I am actually acting like a bot, I would, let's say, edit an attribute. Okay, actually, we would add an attribute here, and the bot would come in at a value and say, hello, friends. Maybe they give you that value. You hit submit, and right now, the way it's working, nothing is really happening here. So, again, if I add that and hit submit, you can see my extra characters are being added. So just to prove that one more time, if I type here Jad, you can see it shows up here. The way we want to actually catch the bot is by validating this particular input. So let's show how to do that now. So we will show you first the most basic method of validation, which is using a clean function or a clean method inside of your class form. And then later we will show you the built-in tools that Django has. So every time you want to create your own custom validator using this default method, you need to say define def. So a method inside this class, then you use the keyword clean underscore, and then whatever name of the field you are checking. In this case, it's boot catcher. So you can just copy and paste that. Okay. So then Django is going to automatically look for methods inside this class that start with clean underscore. Then see if this matches any of the fields they are. And remember, this is a field inside of class, so we use self, and then this is what I am going. So that's what should be a okay. So this is what I am going to do. First, I will say boot catcher is equal to self dot clean boot catcher, cleaned data, and actually grab what boot catcher returning over here from my forms. And then I am going to check if the length of boot catcher is greater than 0. You could also just say if I like football, but this might be a little easier to read, which means so if there is any actual length to the value that's written in boot catcher, then I know some robot came in and scraped the page and filled in the HTML. A human would never actually do that. And then we are going to say raise an error. And there is lot of different areas you can raise, and you would not really have to worry about memorizing any of this because we will move on to built-in validators. But just to give you an idea, the most basic one you are using going to raise a validation error, which kind of makes sense. And then we have something we can return which would be printed the console, and we will say gotcha bot. Okay, so once we raise that error, we will return bot catcher itself. So we saved that and it's reloaded here since we made a change. And now let's try coming to this again. So go to the home page, and then go to the form page, and I am going to fill out the form. So the name will say Mr. Robot. The email will say it's Elliot Evilcore, and then we'll say hello in the text. And then if you are bot, what you are going to do is you will come to this bot catcher scenes. Remember, you actually filling it all in though the HTML, and let's add an attribute here for the value. So I will label it since it's a sneaky bot trying to ruin your website. So we hit submit, and then if we see what happens over here, nothing actually got returned. So we never actually printed anything because we end up raising that validation error. Okay. So again, if I hit submit here, I'm not actually ending up returning anything. So again, nothing's being printed out into the console because we are raising that validation. And if you actually look at the page, the error has been outputted here on the page that says hidden field by catcher got a bot. Okay, great. So that's the very basics of how you can use a clean underscore method instead of your form to do your own validation. But now let's show you how you would more realistically use validation once you are building your own website using Django built-in validators. Okay, let's continue by moving on to the Django's core built-in validators, which will save you a lot of work in the future. So pretty much you will never really do this clean underscore bot catcher validation. Instead of this, what you are going to end up doing is using the Django core. So we will say form Django's core import, and then you are going to import validator. So save that, and then what you are going to be doing is in your actual fields here, you will pass in validators parameters. Okay, so we will say validators is equal to, and this is where we actually can pass in a list of validators. So what you end up doing is calling validators dot, and then you can check the documentation, but there are ton of already built-in validators. Things like checking what's the maximum length of the input, how many characters it has, etc. And what we can do is say use one of the built-in ones. So one of the built-in ones is maximum length validators. Okay, validator. So that's built-in method of this validators. And what we can do is then just pass in as a parameters a number here, and typically you want whatever the max length is. A lot of times it is going to be 0 to check, especially for a bot, right? So basically we replace all of the work we just did with a simple import call import validators. And then in all of these fields, you can always pass in a validators parameter, and this can take in a list of validators. So it's not just limited to one, it can pass in more than one. So we can save that, and then we are going to end up doing is running this again. So we will come here, and then I'm going to refresh the page. Okay, so delete that, go back to the home page, and then come back to the form page. Okay, fill out the form. Doesn't really matter what we do. Okay, x@gmail.com, and some texted you can enter here, and then let's go and do the vote again. So I will add an attribute value is equal to fulled. Okay, FWOLED. Let's make sure that matches hit enter, and then hits submit and know what happens. Hidden field catcher. And then we actually see Django's built-in validators message come back and share this value has at most 0 characters, it has 6. Great. So you can see that Django already has even more information built in as a report back. So hopefully you see that this is a way easier to use than that clean method we had. Alright, now that we have discussed Django built-in validators, let's talk about how you can make your own custom validators using the same sort of methodologies of passing in a validator's parameter. So imagine we wanted to check for the name field that it started with a Z G. We wanted to really make sure that for whatever reason the names had to start with a Z. Well, maybe you don't bother to check the documentation or could not find anything for your specific validation of starting with a Z, or if a character starts for a certain letter. So what you end up doing is if you want to create your own to pass in as a validators parameter, you just create a function outside of the class and then you can name the function. So we will call this check for Z. And the thing here to make sure is that it takes in value, and this is kind of the keyword. It is going to help Django realize that this is going to act as a validator, and we will say if value whatever is written here for this field, in this case, we are going to check for Z. So we will say if value at 0 is not equal to the character Z, and we can do further is do like lower here, we'll raise an error. So raise forms dot validation error and say something like needs to start with the Z. So we'll say name just to make it clear. Save that. And then inside this name, what I can end up doing is saying validators is equal to and passing a list and then just pack it in my check for Z function, which since it takes in value, Django knows it's a validator now. So I will save this and let's make sure that my server is running properly and I will refresh that. Okay, perfect. So now over here, what I am going to do is say form page and then let's fill out the form first. We'll fill out the with just this name and hi at the rate gmail.com and some junk text. Submit and it says name needs to start with Z. Perfect. Okay, so we know how our custom validation is working. Let's make sure it is by passing in just Z here and then we'll say the same thing and it look it in just fine and it printed it out just fine. Okay, all right. So that is how you can make your own custom validation function. And this is usually a lot easier of an approach to take than what clean a method we discussed earlier. Okay, now let's continue our discussion by talking about cleaning the entire form all at once. So, we did see how we would create custom clean methods in our class for a particular fields. But maybe sometimes you just wanted to do one method that cleans the entire field and you don't want to worry about having to do something like an individual validator. So what do you do in that case? Well, let's delete this check for Z and I am going to remove this validator over. So we will save that and we can still check for a bot catcher. That's fine actually. So we don't actually need that. Let's say we wanted to check something like a backup email. So a lot of times when you go to website, you have to fill out your name and then fill out your Gmail email, or then you have to verify your email. So you have to fill it in twice, which makes sense because you don't want to have happen. Okay, that thing as you log into your page for the very first time you are signing up that you mistype your email, otherwise there is no way you will very common field as very email. And this is something you will see often. So I'm sorry if you have used the internet once, you have seen this types of things, and we will verify field, and we are just going to give this a label to say something like, well, that's should be equal to label, okay, not colon, it should be equal to, okay, verify, enter your email, okay, again. So let's save that, and let's refresh the page to make sure that actually worked. It continue, okay, perfect. So this field is required. Enter your email again, and you can use formatting in HTML to make this all look nice. Since I am asking it for paragraph, everything is kind of getting their online break. But again, this would all be done with HTML, CSS styling. That is part of designing. Right now, what we really care about is how do we clean this entire format once to actually grab this email, grab the second email, and make sure they actually match. Well, just like we had the special clean method where you would say clean underscore and then the name of the field you wanted to check. If you wanted to clean the entire form, all you have to do is just say clean, define clean, and that will indicate to Django that this is just a single clean method for the entire format. Uh, so once and what you can do here is call super, and that this is going to allow us to do is grab all the clean data at once. So we'll type a new variable, we'll call it all clean data, and then we call super, close parenthesis, and then of that you call the clean method, and this is going to return all your clean data for the entire form. So you can deal with it all once. And then of this you can grab certain fields. So we'll say email is equal to that all clean data. And then say using bracket notation because it's basically a dictionary. Okay, grab the email field where this key comes from up here, and then we will also want to grab verify email. So we'll say we'll call it email for a verify email. Again, it's all clean data, and I want to grab the verify email key. And then what I am going to do is say if my email is not equal to my verify email, I will raise an error. So I will raise a validation error. Forms validation error. Okay. So causing this, so make sure emails match validation error. Okay. So probably don't want to yell at the user all uppercase, but it's fine for our purposes. And in that case, we don't actually need to return anything. So if the clean runs and everything works, that's totally fine. Okay, we don't need to return. Okay, so let's actually run this on our page. I'm going to run my server again because I cleared it here. Says python manage.py run server again, then hit enter. Make sure it's running here perfect without any error. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this page, and then what I'm going to do is call the form page. So here I see my name, email, enter your email again, it's labeled then text. Okay, so we'll say my name is Josh, and we are actually going to do a non-matching email first. So we'll say, well, it's say a@gmail.com, then b@gmail.com, two different emails. Enter some text here. If I hit submit, I get back, make sure emails match. Okay. So it's cleaning the entire data form, and you can do whatever you want, whatever field from the data form. So now let's make sure these match. If I say Joe's and then hit submit, okay, actually print out my name, email, and text, which means this was there was no error. All right, that's very basics and some more advanced features of how to actually custom validate your forms. So again, you can call your own custom clean underscore method to check just a field, simple field. You can use the built-in validators in Django, which is what I would recommend you do. And if you ever want to clean the entire format once and do all your operations there, then you can use define clean and that will clean out the entire form. And remember, whenever you are creating your own custom validator, you want to make sure you pass in the keyword value before you pass it in here. It's one of these fields. So, all right, this is all about, and this let we will see in the next lecture. Okay, thank you.